I'm delighted to welcome in Ben Veal, who is the founder and director of Second Mountain Comms, but also a personal friend and somebody I went to university with a very long time ago. Ben, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
Hey, Joel. Good, man. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well. I have a voice again, so suddenly doing talk shows feels a lot easier.
What are you doing being up till 1 o'clock in the morning?
I know. Yeah, I know. It's mad. And it's amazing. I think me and you were talking in the green room about like when you find something you're passionate about and how you'll go like above and beyond. It's just that is unfortunately what advocacy is. It makes me do things that aren't always what's in the best interest of my health. I'm trying to get better at that. But yeah, I suppose for anyone that, obviously we go back a very long way, and I'm sure that will be apparent as the conversation unfolds. But for anyone that's not familiar with yourself, do you want to maybe take this opportunity to give us a bit of an intro, talk about maybe the business? And I know obviously you've recently as well got into podcast side of things, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, firstly, you and I go back to the point, but we both had long hair. So that shows how long this relationship goes. And secondly...
I couldn't grow facial hair.
No. Look what's happened now. And secondly, just really glad to be here. I was very pleased to have you on my podcast last year, and it's lovely to be invited on here now. So thank you.
I really appreciate it.
So, very brief nutshell, I run a business called Second Mountain Comms, which specialises in helping not-for-profits and purpose-driven business owners through PR, content and marketing. I've worked in PR for 20 years now, set up my own agency 3 years ago during the 2020 lockdown, which we will no doubt talk about very soon. And I run a couple of podcasts, as Joel said. So one is called Good Journey Through Second Mountain, which is all about speaking with inspiring people and sharing the lessons they've learned along their journeys. And the other one is a real passion project, which I'm really enjoying, called Wrestling Life, which is all about putting the positive side on the world of professional wrestling, which is has been my passion since I was a young lad, really. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love that. And yeah, I've been following the new one that's coming. Yeah, because as you say, obviously I was on yours. And you do amazing at that, by the way. You make me feel so bad and lazy. Like the effort you put into that with the clips and the PR. I appreciate it's your job. But like, I always feel like I'm always doing my guests a disservice because we do the interview and it goes really well. And then there's all the work that comes after that. And you're an absolute machine, Ben. So yeah, anyone that hasn't check that out, please do. And we'll do lots of plugs as well, guys, at the end of the interview for where you can find those things, and you'll find them in the show notes.
There's a fundamental difference between you and I, which is I'm generally doing 1 or 2 of those a month. I'm not keeping a community going like you are here. So it's a lot easier when you are dealing with less quantity.
I suppose, yeah. I'll eventually burn out, I'm sure. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And like I say, we'll talk about where people can find those at the end of the show. But so obviously, what brings you here? Like we share lots of story about long-term health conditions, lots of physical conditions. We talk about things like pain and that sort of thing, and we don't talk nowhere near enough the mental health. We talk about mental health almost as a comorbidity or as a symptom of those physical conditions. So I really appreciate you coming on, especially as a man, and talking about what we're about to go through. But I suppose as maybe a start for 10, do you want to maybe set the scene for everything we're now about to talk about your mental health challenges, how they presented, if it's always been a thing and it just escalated, or if it was linked to a specific moment, and then maybe we'll dig deeper from there.
Yes, I think being realistic, I think living with depression has probably been something I've always lived with. I think I was always pretty flat, certainly going through my teenage years. Lots of big life events that happened in my 20s. I didn't feel like I had maybe the same level of joy that other people do. You look around, you don't know what's in other people's heads, Steve, but I just felt like I wasn't maybe enjoying the world like some people do, and something was missing. It does run in my family, so I knew I had a history of quite significant depression in my family. But I think I did what so many of us do, especially as men. I didn't talk about it, and B, I filled my life with distraction. And I think in my mid-20s, social media properly came in, and I've just had years and years of being able to keep busy the whole time, keep away from my own thoughts. There's always someone you can speak to on Twitter, isn't there, or whatever, and there's always a way to kill 5 minutes rather than be in your own mind and with your own thoughts. But I was gradually struggling more and more and more. My wife and I struggled for a long time with infertility, so we wanted nothing more than to have a child, and it took us a very, very long road to have our first child. And I think because it took so long, I think I already felt like I was missing out in the fact that lots of my friends had children 5, 6, 7, 8 years earlier. And so by the time I became a dad, I think I was already worn out from much of the idea of it, really. Ironically, my biggest crash would come around about the time we were blessed to have a second child. We had gone down the route of adoption, thinking we wouldn't be able to have a second child. We'd been approved to adopt. And in the very same week we were approved to adopt, we then found out we were naturally pregnant, which a lot of people are like, oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. But the thing is, I mean, we've been trying to get naturally pregnant for 12 years by that point, and it just felt like a bit of a sick joke, really. It's like, oh, right. So after all that, after 2 years of, after 5 years of trying again for another child, and after 2 years of going through the pain and the emotion of the adoption process, we could just get pregnant, just like that, just like other people do. I think that was the point where I started spiraling. Well, in fact, I know that was. And throughout my second wife's pregnancy, I just don't think I was really there. I don't think I was there mentally. I was distracted myself with work, and I was getting increasingly irritable. That's when my insomnia, I think, first came in like 2018. We had our second son end of 2018, and I think I just went down from that point, really. I just struggled to, I didn't struggle to be around him as such, but I was struggling to find the joy that I thought, like, in theory, I'd completed my family. I'd got my 2 children. This is what I always wanted. I just wasn't feeling that joy that I felt should be there. Get fast forward about 6 months to the summer of 2019, and I did what so many men do. I go, I know what will make me happy. I'll earn more money and get a new job. So I got headhunted for this very high-flying PR job, lots more money. I thought, well, that's great. I'll be earning lots of money. That will make me happy. And that was the worst decision I ever made. As soon as I walked into that company within a day, I was like, wow, this is not good for me or my mental health. This isn't. I'd left behind quite a nurturing culture. I was like, this is not where I should be at all. And that was getting progressively worse and worse and worse. It got to like Christmas 2019. I remember that was a time when I was genuinely at my lowest. Like, couldn't be around my wife, couldn't be around my kids. I was being very probably emotionally abusive, I would say, by that point. Like, the world had to bend around me. I couldn't understand why the world wasn't bending around me, and I felt like I had no time to myself. I just felt squeezed all the time. And then COVID happened. I went into 2020 thinking, like, right, okay, I'm going to really try this year. I'm going to try and put some structures in place. I'd done some small wins. Like, one night a week, I said to my wife, my wife, who's a saint, by the way, I said to her, I'm going to go swimming one day after work to get some me time. She's like, okay, you do what you need to do. I'll just carry on, raising 2 children pretty much on my own whilst working a full-time job. Yep, you just crack on and go swimming then. And then, actually, I also am going to go and out to a coffee shop and have some more reading time and stuff because I need more me time. And she's like, yeah, you just keep doing you and I'll just keep, running the entire household on my own whilst you work through your mental health. Great. And and then COVID happens, and you go for, I already wasn't coping because I felt like I had no time to myself, and I was leaving the house 12 hours a day. And suddenly I'm at home with a 6-year-old and a 15-month-old, I think he was at that time.
Yeah.
And I had undiagnosed anxiety and depression, and suddenly the world has stopped, and apparently we walk out of our doors and we're all going to get killed by this mega virus. And and I think that was when the wheels really came off, really. So we went into lockdown a week early. I remember the date well, March 16th 2020. And I remember there's a photo I've got where I went for a walk like 5 days into it's the first, when you could do those, like, you're allowed to do those little walks, and I went out and I took a selfie of myself, And I've got that photo, and I look at that often because it looks the same as me, but I can just see in my eyes are just dead to the world. There's just nothing there. And I just couldn't cope at all. And I was not sleeping. I was waking up at like 3 a.m. I was so overwhelmed, I couldn't even put structures in place with my wife. So I couldn't be like, okay, well, I'll communicate this to my boss. I will work this pocket of the day, you'll work this pocket. Compounded by the fact that my boss had said it's going to be business as usual, and if we were working 40 hours before, we're going to have to work 80 hours now to survive this pandemic, which I've never heard any worse advice in my life. But I was getting up in the middle of the night. I was starting work at like 3-4 a.m. just to try and keep on top of it, rather than doing what I should have done, which is said, I'm struggling, I need to be furloughed because I have 2 children and my wife's in the NHS, so just furlough me out of the business because that's why it's there. But anyway, got to April 15th, 2020. I get a phone call out of the blue, and it's just, hi, Ben. Yeah, we're letting you go. You're going to get a phone call from HR at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to confirm that you're being made redundant. And
Wow.
that was when the wheels, properly started coming off. I think the wheels had already been coming off. But at that point, like, the one thing that had tethered me, which was my status, I'd reached this high level in a business, my status and my worth outside of the home was the validating thing. And suddenly overnight that was just gone.
And thank you so much for sharing all that, because I realise there's a lot of layers here to what you're willingly sharing with us. And yes, and on behalf of everybody watching and who will watch and listen to this back later, I appreciate you giving us that insight, because I think it's important that people understand that other people feel like this too, especially when you talk about things like numb and sort of almost like chasing that dream, chasing happiness kind of thing. So before we move on to like that next stage, there was just a couple of points I made. In terms of, like, you mentioned like the word distraction numerous times. Now, the reason I want to come back to that is because on this show, we talk a lot about distraction for people that are in a situation that can't be fixed, chronic long-term pain or things like that. And we use distraction. One of the reasons I'm here doing this tonight, because for an hour, I'm not thinking about how uncomfortable I am. But obviously there's when you flip that and you're using distraction to not deal with something that's maybe not being managed, not being treated, not getting the help you probably need for that condition, it obviously could be quite a dangerous thing. And by the sounds of it, that's obviously, you have that insight now, but at the time, I'm guessing you had no idea that that's what you were doing.
I think I did, but I think I didn't want to admit it. So I had a real view that medication was, for whatever reason, I think part of it's family, part of it's culture. I had this view that I wouldn't be medicated, because to be medicated for a depression would be, I don't even know what my issue was with it looking back now, but I had a real problem with, I remember, maybe went back to 2017, 2018, my wife saying, you need to see a doctor. So I'm not seeing a doctor, nothing wrong with me. You're just not working around me. And what's changed in the last 3 years has been learning, the fact that I do live with anxiety and depression, and being comfortable to say that. And it took me a long, long time to be comfortable enough to say that, let alone to consider doing a show like this. I think putting this out there and saying to people I'm talking about it is probably the first most of my contacts know about it. But I do live with that. And the other thing is learning a lot about neurodiversity, because my son's autistic. We've been on that journey. Mm-hmm. I now, through my podcast, speak to lots of people who are neurodiverse. I'm 99% positive that I've got ADHD. I'm just undiagnosed because I haven't had gone through the process. It's such a long process. But I've been learning a lot about, actually, because this is all interlinked, and the reality is the world as it's set up doesn't fit me that well. And it's now starting to, because I have things like, I have this studio space. I mean, now I have my own private space that thankfully through my business I can afford to get, which many people don't have that. But go back to 3 years ago, I couldn't cope with the world because I couldn't fit into it. And I think there's so many people, hopefully some people who are kind of listening tonight that this resonates with, really, who, you just feel like you don't really understand where you fit in the world. And that was me. I just felt like everyone else seems to be okay, and why am I finding this so difficult? And in the last 3 years, I think I've come to realize most people aren't okay, actually. And COVID, for all its awful side, I think one of the positives that came out of it was it got people talking about mental health and actually not being okay, and it took away some of the gloss.
100%. And I think it also made people realize there's a better way with work-life balances and what's important. I know it definitely refocused things for me. Like, my experience with the pandemic was slightly different because I had to do the whole shield and things, so I couldn't even take the dog for a walk. And it made you sort of reevaluate things. And I very much was somebody, my wife was always complaining that I'd be the first in, last out at work, and I'd come home with stress headaches and migraines like constantly. And all of a sudden I went through that experience. It's like, I'm done with that. I just don't want to do that. And I don't, it's not because I work any less. I just realized I was trying to fight fires that I didn't need to fight. And I was trying to be a hero in areas I didn't need to try and be a hero. And now it's just like, you know what, I'm just going to get my head down and I'm going to do me and do what I need to do and find a bit more fun in life. And so I think for a lot of people, even though they might not realize they're addressing their mental health and prioritizing it a bit more, I think a lot of people went through that sort of revelation, didn't they?
They did. I mean, I think a lot of people have forgotten about it now. Like, I think we have this really, you and I spoke when you came on my podcast, and a lot of this I feel bad talking about because I'm acutely aware that I'm on a program called the Chronic Pain Talk Show, and I don't live with chronic pain apart from the anxiety and depression I go through, and I know I'm very blessed in that regard. And when you describe to me the level of shielding you had to do during lockdown, and here I am moaning about only getting out for my one walk a day, I'm very well aware that I am very blessed in many regards. But the problem with anxiety and depression, especially depression, is it doesn't matter how fit, healthy, much money you have or whatever. If you are depressed, you are depressed. And you hear lots of these things about people. Some of the most depressed people in the world are people who win the lottery, and then 6 months later they're more significantly worse than they were before they won it. Like, there's no logic between depression and your life status. And ironically, my depression hit me at the time when I finally had 2 healthy children and a good job. Like, literally none of it lead up to it. It was almost like that links to my kind of name, my business. Like, it's like I climbed this mountain, I got to the top of it, and then at the top I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at now. I don't understand this view, but I can't see myself on it.
And the trouble is, for anyone like myself included who's struggled with depression, it's so demoralizing hearing that. What have you got to be sad about? Or you've got so much to be thankful for. Yeah, I know, and I feel guilty for that. And sometimes the guilt is fueling depression. I know it definitely does for me. Like, if I wake up and I'm in control of it now, but a couple of years ago, if I had a low mood day or I was having some negative thoughts, and when I say negative thoughts, I sort of find myself I shouldn't make it more palatable. We should just say what it is, suicidal thoughts. When I would wake up and have those days, the first thing you're thinking about is you think your beautiful children or your beautiful wife and your family and the roof over your heads and your career. And then the first thing somebody thinks to say, just because it's like a human response, what you got to be sad about? It's like, for me anyway, I don't know, it just fueled. It was like pouring fuel on the flames of that depression,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it was kind of 2018 where I was having those. I'd never verbalized that I'd had those kind of suicidal thoughts before, but I was just like, why am I here? Like, would anyone miss me? And I think with how I was behaving towards my wife especially, like, genuinely, would everyone be better off if I wasn't around? And that's where the descent begins. And there's a crucial difference between the me of then and the me of now, which isn't just medication and isn't just situational, but it's the fact that I talk with lots of people.
Yeah.
So, we've mentioned podcasting a few times. That's helped massively because it's like I get like lots of little therapy sessions with different guests, but also I've got to reconnect and make new friends. Like, you and I haven't spoken for donkey's years, and now we've spoken loads this year. And that was the same during COVID, like reconnecting with with old friends and trying to because you had to, didn't you? Because it was that way you went stir crazy. And so ironically, I feel better connected, and I feel like I've got better friends now in my late 30s than I ever had in my life, really. But probably because also the tools work well for me. Like, WhatsApp works really well for me for the kind of communication, how I communicate with people and what I like. It's a really good tool for me, which it isn't for some people. So I think I've kind of learned a lot about who I am in the last few years, definitely. But I mean, also to say, we were going to have this show, I think, in May, or it was probably about June. I was going to come on as a guest. And then I lost my dad very suddenly in early June and had to say to you, I can't do this. I can't do this right now. Yeah. I felt like I was in quite a good place the early part of this year. And the last 6 months, I feel like, I've used this phrase a few times already, the wheels have come off, but I felt like I've unraveled so much. And I'm in a process now, speaking now about trying to unpick exactly, what's next, really. And not what's next in a kind of extreme way, as I'm going to change what I do for a job or anything like that, but just trying to, I don't know, it's a reprioritization thing. I've never had any experience more grounding than, holding my dad's hand as he died, kind of thing, and just telling him, you did well, and I'm proud of you, and you're a good man. Things that I wish I'd said to him, years before.
That's really important, and I'm sure or listen, if you've done all the treatment stuff like I have around CBT and talking therapies and stuff, it's really important to, like, those life events, they happen, and it doesn't mean that you're failing in your mental health. It is them life events that are going to happen, aren't they? And I know I've definitely been there where things have happened at work or at home or whatever, and if I was like, you used the term, well, I would use wheels falling off, and then trying to remind myself how far I've come. Actually, one of our own viewers in chat, who they will know who they are, sent me a video that was a very good reminder of reminded me like how far I'd come, because you have like one, a bad episode, and obviously losing your dad is, horrendous and as bad as it gets. But I'm hoping you're finding ways through that. And I think you being on here tonight, Ben, just goes to show the strength. And just because I didn't get a chance early, because I didn't want to interrupt your flow, I think it's really important that as well that the whole reason that this show, or it's still got the title The Chronic Pain Club, but incorporates the whole mental health and that spectrum, is that there's far too many people out there that aren't considering that in the same sort of conversation as arthritis and the other topics that we maybe, we need to make that more the norm and that multidisciplinary approach. So your experiences are absolutely valid, regardless of what your pandemic looked like compared to mine.
Thank you. I mean, the problem with depression and why you read all these statistics about, men of our age group being at the highest risk of suicide is you don't see any of it. So, like here I am, I've got this lovely office of, won lots of awards, from the outside in, because I'm very good at social media, because I've been doing it as a job for 15 years. I'm very good at curating a life. So, you do see the really good stuff generally. And, then you host podcasts. And obviously, like you're doing tonight, you go into presenter mode. It's a certain, you flick a switch because you are essentially this is a bit different, but when I'm creating a podcast, I'm creating content. So this is what people don't see is I finish a podcast, and then usually what I do is I spend about an hour with the lights off in my office, just really quietly just decompressing, because I find the whole thing of doing a podcast so emotionally overwhelming that I then have to have some time just calming down before I can do anything else. And it's the same. And that's what people don't see is, so people look at and go, oh, you're a workhorse, like you were saying at the start, like you're a machine. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm trying to find my way in this world. I'm trying to find what good I can do in this world. And I think conversations, like your kind of thing here, conversation has changed lives. I think that's something I'm bringing into the world because I'm a good communicator. Doesn't mean I'm finding it easy, and I probably never will. But it's going, the old me would have like jumped from, I used to jump from one meeting to another meeting to another meeting to another meeting. It was always reactive. My PR job was always jump. And I never got to call the shots. So now my day is, I was talking about bending earlier, obviously my day is around my children. It's compressed. I'm 2 young kids and doing school run and stuff, but also I have a comfy chair here in the office. I sit and read a book for at least half an hour a day, regardless of how busy I am. That is no correlation between how much work I've got on, but I can't just work for 6 hours straight without that break. So I weave that into my morning. I usually do it as soon as I've done the drop off of school, because I find the whole thing pretty sensorily overwhelming. So I think that's what I just encourage people, anyone who is in a similar boat to me, is just try and find your pockets. Like, so I've heard some people have described it as like pockets of joy, but I don't even describe it as that. It's like they're like my pockets of calm. That's like my protected time, and that is I think that's the fundamental difference. And then of course medication, which I finally took in 2021.
if you don't mind talking a little bit about that, because as somebody, because I think especially in this country of men, there was something you were explaining earlier. Sorry, that it was exactly like my experience, and I don't need medication. There's nothing wrong, And I went through that whole thing, and then when I did try medication, I had lots of bad experiences. Not because it wasn't right for me, just trying to find the right combination, and then I sort of ended up just stepping away and retracting from all of it and having to find a totally different route. So, would you mind sharing a little bit about what that was like, the medication side of things?
Yeah. So I launched my company in August 2020. So kind of went through lockdown, decided I'm going to launch my own business, and this is going to be it. I'm going to go freelance. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to help good people do good and do all this kind of great altruistic stuff. And I rode a wave of that for about 9-10 months, like until about June 2021, where I was getting lots of social likes and engagement, all that kind of stuff. And then it just hit me that actually my life's not really. We were kind of coming out of the worst of a pandemic. I was like, what comes next? Like, okay, I work for myself now, but what am I essentially doing? I'm working in my bedroom. Is my balance any better? Not really. I haven't learnt anything. And I was worse in the summer of 2021 than I had been 18 months ago, really. Like, it's almost like I haven't learnt anything because the world was opening up again. I don't even know what it was, Joel, but it got to June of 2021 and my relationship with my wife hit our lowest ebb it had ever hit, resulting in us separating and me having to move out, which, so I left for family home for a while, did a best to kind of keep it from the kids and to pop in every day and stuff, but essentially was jumping from one place to another, just trying to kind of save my marriage, really. But I think it was in that time I saw a CBT. I started to get in CBT sessions whilst I was away and speaking to someone, and it took a CBT specialist who I'd never met before to say to do that test and go, yeah, you're chronically depressed and you've got chronic anxiety. You need to go and see a doctor quickly. And even though other people have been telling me that, it was like hearing it from her coupled with where I was like, yep, okay, I'll do something about it now. So I phoned up the doctor, and it is the easiest thing in the world to get medication, rightly or wrongly, I don't know. When it comes to depression, it felt like I was asked 2 questions, and suddenly I had a prescription for, for antidepressant drugs, which surprised me at how easy it was. Really, still surprises me, to be honest, how easy it is to maintain it. Probably that's where my love-hate relationship, the whole thing is. Like, actually, how long do you stay on medication for? I just still don't know that. But yeah. I got on medication, and I think I was lucky in that the first one is what I'm still on, which, from what I'm speaking with a lot of people, I think is quite surprising. I think I found the right one first.
Yeah.
But those first 3 weeks were awful, absolutely awful. And they coupled with me returning home. Like, I forced myself back into family home probably way before I should. I probably should have taken 3 months away minimum for us to start to have conversations. But I was, in my mind, I was like, the longer I'm away, the bigger chance that I'm never going to be able to save my marriage. So I kind of forced my way back in and started taking those drugs at the same time. And it was horrible. Like, all the insomnia came back. I felt sick all the time, awful headaches. And trying to catch up on a lot of work I've missed whilst I've been kind of essentially safer surfing as well for a few weeks. That was bad. But when the drugs took in, there I did feel, it's not like you feel an instant relief, but I felt like a little bit of clarity. Like, everything just felt like it had the edge ever so slightly taken off, and things that would have been unbearable before were bearable now. And that's probably how I'd describe the last 2 years, really. I wouldn't say I still, I'm this picture of positivity all the time, but I have more daily resilience to things that before would have tipped me over. And I don't know, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? I don't know how much of that is medication and how much of that is learned behaviour. I don't know how much is for placebo effect versus for reality of the medication. What I do know is that I have a better ability to cope with more than I used to do 2 years ago. And as a result, my depressed days are further apart, because I don't feel, very rarely now do I feel guilty about how I behave with other people. Or, I was horrible to that person. I was really rude to my wife. I was horrible to my kids. That used to eat me up. I don't generally have that anymore. I just have depressed days because I think I'm wired that way. And some days I wake up and it's a bad day and I don't want to see anyone and I don't want to engage with the world. But they're not, it used to be all the time I was self-critical of myself and be like, oh, you know, replaying back stuff you did before. And I don't have that as much anymore.
Yeah, and that's exhausting as somebody that struggles with that a lot. Like I'm a constant worrier and always worrying about how things were perceived with things I did. It's exhausting. But I love the word you used, the word resilience, because it comes up a lot on this show. And one of the things I talk about in my personal experience is that, like, you know, I don't see that my depression has gone away, got better. I don't see that my pain has gone away or got better. Just my ability to cope with it has improved. My resilience has improved, and therefore, then when I have those bad days, they're just a blip, not an absolute sort of like pothole that I'm falling into. So I think, yeah, that obviously for you is great. You found that medication. I think for anyone else listening, if whether that's CBT, talking therapies, other coping mechanisms, I don't think that what caused the improvement really matters. The main thing is that you're sort of like putting your hand up for help, isn't it? And I suppose, I don't know if we've really covered that already. Like you've talked about when things get really bad and that, like, how did that sort of asking for help look for you? Was it like literally because things got so bad it was like impossible to avoid, or I don't know, was it something you wanted to do before and there was something stopping you? Or would you mind sort of sharing a little bit about asking for
Well, I
help?
mean, I think I felt like I was forced into it to a degree to actually finally get help because, you know, I was basically, you know, I was kicked out of the house and the marriage was over was my understanding really at that point. It was very
Right.
clear this can't continue anymore. And it wasn't even this can't continue anymore unless you do something about it. Because I think I'd had so many of these conversations before. So I think the place of me going for help was finally that I wanted to do something about it. It wasn't like I didn't enter into it as like a marriage saving thing. I entered it into a like, oh my god, I've lost my marriage. I really need to sort myself out kind of thing. Because I think it's a bit like that It's a Wonderful Life thing where you can kind of see his future playing out. Like I could see what my life was going to be now. That I was going to live on my own, see my kids once every 2 weeks at a weekend if I was very lucky, start from scratch again. I could see it. It wasn't like this might happen. It was this is going to happen. And yeah, so I think that was what tipped me over. Was I decided finally, and that's the advice I give to anyone who's in a similar situation: is no one can force you to do it. For years, people have been saying you needed to do this, and my response was, "No way! I'm never going to be on medication." Because I'd seen people who had been over medicated, I know people who've been over medicated, and there's a real difference, I think, between taking medication and being medicated. And in my view, it was I take a pill and suddenly I'm going to be a different person, and it's not going to be good. Whereas actually, for me, it's almost like it's just part of my routine now. I barely think about it. I think about it when it comes to annual reviews for it, because I don't know. Do I want to be on antidepressant medication for the rest of my life? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I do. I would have said at the start of it, no, this is. And I remember my GP when I had my last review. He said, "You should be definitely weaning yourself off of it the next year." And I said to him, "Well, my dad's just died, so I'm probably not going to be doing anything like that
Yeah.
anytime soon." But I don't know. Maybe yeah. The ideal thing is yes, I find all these mechanisms, so I don't need it anymore. But I'm terrified of going back to that world because ultimately I just want to be a good husband and a good father and good friend. And I feel like I lost a lot of my time with my dad towards the end because I was so focused on sorting my own stuff out, and I can't
Yeah.
do anything about that now. It's done. I don't want to lose time with other people because I just don't want to be constantly in a thing where I'm always trying to get myself better. Like, I'm just so exhausted of telling, I wanted to come and tell this story with you, but I'm so exhausted telling this story. Like I'm just tired of. I'm happy to say I've got anxiety, I've got depression, and I'm happy to have conversation with people because I want to help other people. But I don't have any answers. I'm literally just trying to make it through today, tomorrow, this week, this month.
Yeah.
And I think that is the thing when you're living with any kind of, chronic pain, mental health thing, is you're never going to be better. But then, is anyone who is who is 100% healthy? It's just, again, just breaking down that stigma of actually everyone, every A-list celebrity you see on Instagram looking amazing, their perfect life, has got stuff going on and things they're unhappy with, and just accepting none of us are happy with that lot. We're all just trying to make the best of it, aren't we?
Yeah, and that stigma point, I thought when you said about that medication, I thought to myself, that's just stigma in a nutshell, because nobody comments on me being on anti-rheumatic drugs for my entire life. I've been on them since I was 12 years old, and I'll be on them until the day I die. And nobody has an issue with that. Nobody's trying to talk me off them or anything, because they know that manages the physical aspect of my disease. We still have this big issue where sort of like antidepressants are seen as this like short-term thing. And the issue I have with that, and I know that they can cause dramatic changes. And like I say, I've had lots of bad experiences with them. But the issue I have with medical communities and others seeing like antidepressants and things as a short-term thing, that suggests that somebody is failing, or somebody did something wrong, or somebody was, did something to cause their inability to cope, rather than it being like a chronic long-term health condition. Because I don't know about you, I've not met anyone that has shared with me that they had depression and it was just a thing like getting the flu. It wasn't like, oh, they had it for a couple of weeks and it went. It's a long-term thing that comes and goes, ebbs and wanes, just like a chronic physical illness would. So
I think we have a real problem in this country, this whole stiff upper lip thing, which we've carried on from the wars. It's like, no, actually, like, we're really, if you think what we've gone through as well, I mean, I'm not putting it down to this because my issues predate this, but we've gone through, and not to get political, I'm just talking about the uncertainty. We've gone through Brexit, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through cost of living, gone through essentially a recession. There's a lot of like really big stuff going on, plus the wars, the different leaders. We've had a really, really unsettled like 6 or 7 years as anyone in the UK that's listening to this. It's been a really weird time to be an adult in the UK. Lots of like micro stressors that generally, like, yeah, I'm sure our parents were always like, oh, the government were useless or whatever, you need to have your privatization of the railway or whatever like that. But I feel like we've gone through a really stressful period at a macro level.
Yeah,
that's like, and there's no way that can't filter down, because it just needles away at you day by day. And that's completely off topic, but I just want to say, I think, like, anyone that's finding things a bit trickier, I've spoken to a lot of people this year that just seem to really be finding 2023 tough. And, I have, because of bereavement, and lost a few close people this year, but I wonder if I'd have just found it tough anyway, because it's like all the novelty of COVID's past. Life isn't any different, really. We all thought it was going to be massively different, and everything's just reverted back to basically how it was. And everyone's just trying to find their feet, aren't they? Like, we all want to live a bit differently to how we did before, but it's really hard to live countercultural.
And I think, going back to that resilience word again, like you talked about having depression for a long while and it sort of all come out. And I think that is the thing. When you've got that stuff going on and your resilience is low, then those issues will present. It's like, it's no coincidence that I had the biggest problem with pain in my life and then negative thoughts when I become a dad. It wasn't because I was ungrateful. It wasn't because I felt I was very fortunate and lucky and I had a beautiful baby boy. I had no sleep and, everything went out of the window. I suddenly lost all my free time. I couldn't play rugby anymore. And all these things happened. Then, of course, those little things we have lurking in the background that we're not tackling, that we're not prioritizing, that we're not, because we almost self-stigmatize them. I know I certainly self-stigmatize, like when it comes to my mental health. And then it takes an event like that for that stuff to blow up. So I think, it comes back to resilience, doesn't it? Where something like a condition like depression or anxiety, unless, like I say, if I haven't made that clear already in the conversation tonight, anyone listen to this, like, start thinking about them as long-term health conditions, chronic conditions, not flash in the pans. Like, that resilience goes, they suddenly become a major impact and thing on your life, don't they? And then impossible to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they don't go away. You just learn to manage them, I think, is what I'm saying. The other thing that's been quite powerful about the journey I've been on is that I think it's helped with my relationship with my son, who, had his autism diagnosis 2 years ago. And we talk a lot. I think I talked to him about having anxiety. And I think that he's found that quite helpful, because he understands that, I don't think he's seeing a dad figure who's got it all figured out. He's seeing someone who's trying his best. But I often say to my son, I say, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed today. I'm just going to pop off and go on the exercise bike, or I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm just going to go out for a walk, because actually I want him to see that, I don't have all the answers, and that just because he's not suddenly going to figure this all out when he turns into an adult. He's got to learn some coping strategies now, or try to help him into his adult life. And hopefully that some of the learnings I've had in the last 5 years will help him on his journey to find a bit more peace in his life. Things like what I've described, the things I do to cope when I'm overwhelmed, are things that hopefully he can weave in, or things like that anyway.
Yeah, 100%. Like literally the one thing where I'll judge myself so far, if my son grows up to be another man, particularly in this country, feels like they can't put their hand up and say when they're struggling, and I've kind of failed as a dad. I think that for me, I want him to know he can ask for help. I want him to know he'd say when he's sad, and at the minute he's telling me every day, which is heartbreaking when toddlers are doing that thing. But like I say, I think it's really important, and know that just like you coming on, I think it's been really refreshing. We have a lot of people who will come on, they will tell their journey, their experience, and then that'll be all like unicorns, rainbows, and that's great. We need the inspirational stuff, and we want to see how people can have a life with their long-term health condition. I think what's been really refreshing, Ben, not only just your ridiculously candid, raw honesty and everything that you've shared, but the fact that you've mentioned things you're still figuring out and going day by day and having setbacks, and I think that's such an important thing when we have these conversations, that people know that we're human beings. We're going to fail sometimes, and life is shit. And every now and then, it's okay to have a wobble. And yeah, I just, on behalf of the community, I really want to thank you for sharing that side of it. Not just the whole "this happened and now I'm brilliant" kind of thing. So
thank you. And also one thing I would say, like I mentioned about podcasting, one of the things that's been very magical over the last year, some of the best people I've got to interview over the last year, including you, it started on a connection of things they're struggling with in life. So whether it's been a health scare, or it's been bereavement, or it's been mental health stuff, like I've interviewed some amazing people, and people I've looked up to on the TV for years, and I've then connected with them over the raw challenges of life, and then had lovely conversations. And I think that's what I'm learning. What I've learned from all of this and learning is that, life becomes a lot more interesting when, you actually get to see people where they really are at and have these proper conversations, not the surface gloss stuff, but the chats like this. And, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff, because I think it's important, and hopefully some good I don't ever want my kids to go to get to the dark depths I got to, if I can do anything to avoid it. And I know there's only so much I can do, but hopefully I get on top of my own stuff to a degree, and hopefully that at least provides a better atmosphere that they're raised in.
Yeah. Well, if anything else, Ben, just know that alone that I've sat here having to bite my wobbling bottom lip to feel represented. Think I could list a whole thing, but just off the top of my head, is like sad things about that whole just throwing myself into meat and coming home super late, and then having the audacity to say, I need a break, I need to find a hobby, do something for me, when I've just literally just removed myself from the situation to try and cope.
I used to come home at 7:00 at night, having not been in the house for 12 hours, and be livid that the house was a mess. I'm not even joking. I used to voice my anger in 2019. But the context of that was I've been out since 7:30. I've been on a freezing cold bicycle, so we couldn't afford another car. So I was cycling in the rain or the sleet to get to work. You get home in the darkness from a day where it's been non-stop, and you walk into what's essentially a sanctuary, and it's chaos. What I didn't see was what it's like between 3 and 7 o'clock after school run, because I never did it until COVID.
Yeah.
And now I know that you can literally do nothing between 3 and 7. It is the witching hours. And, and I'm now there to help with the chaos. No one enjoys that bit of time. You just get through it. But I cringe at my 2019 self, but I wasn't doing it from a place of malice then. I just couldn't cope with the world. And now I can a little bit more.
And I think when you've got that much, I often describe the mental health side of my condition as like noise. And when I'm struggling with a lot of pain, I describe it as noise. And I think when you walk into a house with kids and dogs and all the chaos, you don't see the beauty in that. And that's taken me traveling the world and having time away and coming back to sort of sometimes see the beauty in that. Because if you have got like negative thoughts, they're exhausting. They're absolutely exhausting, and you're beating yourself up 24/7. You don't get a break from yourself. And then, like you say, you walk into that environment, and it's just, that can be, for me, it used to be anyway, that straws breaks cows back. So very, very relatable, like scary relatable, Ben, like scary relatable. So I think it's really important you mention it, because I've never considered sharing those bits as part of like my mental health journey. So it just goes to show that when you talk about these things, people feel represented and seen, and me too, and they don't feel like they're failing as much. So I really appreciate.
Well, I'm very conscious of time, but just one final thing, which is that I think as you know, men of our age group, we're trying to parent in a different way to our parents, and we're trying to be present and loving and caring, but also we still think we should be the breadwinners and we should still play a traditional male role, and it's a very confusing time. And I think, you know, trying to understand your place in the home trying to understand my place in the home has been one of the biggest changes for me in the last 3 years, and I'm still trying to work on that. But you know, we grew up on a model of kind of that, or I certainly did, that kind of 50s housewife model where my dad was out for all day long, my mum did everything around the house, he came in, dinner was on the table, and I went into marriage thinking that that's what it would be like for me, and that isn't life anymore, because in nearly every relationship 2 people work full time, and so you both have to do equal amounts, and it's just been a real learning to kind of try and bring myself up to a better standard, really, and try and give my, you know, we've celebrated 15 years of marriage now, and you know, I want the next 15 to be a hell of a lot better than the 15 that have just gone.
You're doing amazing, Ben, and I know I've already said it, but thank you so much for sharing. Someone's put in the chat, one of the best chronic pain club guests, raw, honest, relatable on so many levels. So genuinely, we must do this again, Ben, at some point down the line, even if it's just to talk about podcasts. I think if there's someone out there, especially a bloke that's watching this and feeling a little bit more human because we've shared these experiences, then it's certainly worth it if you could spare more time. But thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. I feel like I should give you the opportunity just to give a few plugs in. Where can people find you, either on social media or your podcasts, and give them a like?
Thank you. At social media, I'm at Ben Veal Writes on pretty much everything: Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. And then my website, secondmountaincoms.co.uk, and you can find me all over social at Second Mountain Comms. And then my 2 podcasts are Good Journeys with Second Mountain, of which episode 12 is with Joel Nelson, check it out, and Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, if wrestling is your kind of thing. But even with the world of wrestling, I'm trying to have conversations like this, as in we've already covered depression, we've covered suicide, we've covered some pretty dark stuff in just a couple of episodes. So I'm not, you know, what I want to do is be in the same space that Joel's in terms of genuine, proper conversations, because I just haven't got time for the fluff anymore, really.
Yeah, no, there's and I think again we've covered that nicely where you talked about sort of Instagram and social media and that in a minute. And like with everyone doing a podcast, to say they're doing a podcast, I think it's really important what people like yourself are doing to have those genuine conversations to try and reach people and make a difference. And yeah, it came on my radar really quickly. So you're definitely doing good things, Ben. And thank you so much again for sharing, and all the best for your one day at a time going forward. And appreciate you giving up your time.
Thank you.